All right. It's a Tuesday. Woohoo! That means that it's another episode of Talk Openly.
Weren't we just here?
We were just here. Yeah,
Mm,
it's
it's good.
incredible.
It's good to see you again, Jack.
It's always good to see you, Daniel. Yes. And I'm looking forward to our topic for tonight, which is, nurturing a resilient meditation practice. That's a lot of encouraging words there. And I hope that we can offer some. I can't say that I've always been the best at the nurturing side of things.
Yeah.
My meditation practice is pretty strong, but not very kind all the times. So I think I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, boy, my goodness. I thought I was coming here to learn from you. So we'll produce something out of all of this. I'm sure of it. It's always
Exactly.
a good show. I always feel so uplifted after talking to you. Like I can come in with sort of like a little bit of like tension, or maybe even like a little bit of a bad attitude or bad mood or something, or something just weighing more like maybe something like weighing on me. And then we have a show, and afterward I feel light as a feather.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of Sangha is
It
that
really is.
can kind of remind each other that we're not alone. We're really
That's
not
right.
alone.
That's right.
And we can do this, and it's going to look unique, but there's going to be ways that our trajectories are very similar. So
True.
yeah,
Yeah.
really important. Well,
How you
hopefully,
doing?
thanks for asking. My brain is like, it feels like the kind of like, and I've talked about this before, like the cartoon image where someone has a bubble over their head and it's got like scritchy scratches all in it because they're angry or whatever it is. But it feels like that, like inside of my head.
Mm.
So I've got a little bit of a headache. So physically a little bit meh, and yeah, mentally a little meh, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, such is life, I'm actually working on a talk that I'll be giving, not at the temple, but online on the 31st, I believe, or it's either the 30th or 31st, that Sunday. And it's going to be on that kind of like suffering of change, where just kind of like the everyday disappointments and drudgery that is the kind of like baseline samsaric depression.
You sold me right there. I can't wait.
It's yeah, it's essential to recognize that that's where we're at, and to try and pull ourselves from that like roller coaster of like, oh, I gotta just, I gotta get to the good stuff, and like hold on to it, and that's really where the suffering's at. So I'm reflecting on that with a kind of yeah, a little bit of stress in the brain.
Isn't
um
it? Do you think that it's kind of good, like when you're working on a talk or you're thinking about one of these topics, to essentially be grappling with some of that in your own life,
oh
maybe
yeah,
at
it
the same
super
time?
helps. Yeah,
Yeah.
it super helps because one of the three ways that we learn it, listening, contemplating, and then like experiencing, right, having your lived experience like that. um I feel like that's the most potent one, right?
Yeah.
um because then we put in the listening and contemplating into practice, hopefully, or don't, and then we see the results of of that, which is very often the case, is not applying the Dharma or antidotes or whatever, and then
Right.
seeing, okay, yep, it's still not working to do it that way.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
is
that.
it does it talk does is it primarily is the talk primarily about like identifying it, or is it you oftentimes bring in sort of like an antidote sort of approach as well? Do you have some of that in the talk too?
I think I will. Yes, yes. There will be some lived experience, some exploration with the audience, and antidotes. I do like to make encourage discussion, though. Yeah, I always seem to have just like a block of a block of text almost. So I'm trying to move away from that as well. But anyways, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm recognizing, those very things in my day to day of like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling tugged here, or I'm feeling disappointed here, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that is disappointing. That's kind of where we're at. We're in a disappointing realm. Dang it.
How did I get here?
I know, right? Well, how are you, Daniel? What's going on in your world?
Um, yeah, well, it's summertime, so things are my schedule and everything's a little bit different than it is the rest of the year. And I've
Mhm.
had the pleasure for the last like week and a half to have my youngest daughter with me, like staying with me around the clock. And it's just been amazing. We've been hitting the gym together, and she's showing me the value of persistence and sort of, staying at it, right? Like whatever, we're just having a good time together. So that's been really pleasant. I had a surprise darshan meeting with Lama on Saturday, where I had sort of like forgotten. Whatever. Long story short, one way or the other, it wasn't on my mind until sort of the last minute, and so I had a real like sort of authentic actual like meeting where I hadn't thought, like, not that they aren't all authentic. I just mean like I didn't like prep for it, right? So I really just went in with what was right there in front of me. And it was interesting because uh, what was on my mind was actually something that is what we're talking about tonight, which was this. I had sort of this like nihilistic sort of viewpoint, right, where I was like, man, I don't really I don't really get it, even with all the practice, and even with, okay, achieving enlightenment, oh great, maybe, and being of benefit to everybody, and developing, growing bodhicitta and all this stuff. Why? What's the point of it? Like, who? Yeah, it was like that,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm right there with you sometimes.
Yeah, where I was like, yeah, yeah, sounds good, but why? Like, does it's all equally meaningless and pointless? And I was sort of in that mindset, and I was really quite interested when I went in. I wasn't nervous because I've never known Lama to do anything but give me good advice and to quell my fears. But I was sort of like, man, how's he gonna, I'm coming in kind of raw, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I wonder what he's gonna say. And oh my God, I left feeling so buoyed, like I was like, had all my concerns and doubts, everything's resolved. Oh, it was beautiful. Yeah. It was
Can
a
I
lovely,
ask,
yeah,
do
it
you
was a really good
remember?
experience.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I'm wondering, like, were there any takeaways that you could
Oh,
share
so
that felt,
many. It's
yeah.
like one of those things. They just keep like vibrating. It keeps coming back again and again, and it will, no doubt, if it's like any of the other meetings I've had with him, where it'll just continue to sort of echo in my mind for a while. Part of what he told me was, he was like, yeah, the problem is that if you're prone to sort of these, like this high level of thought, like, you basically, what he said was, you need to learn to join heaven and earth. That was one of the things that he said. And the idea being there that, like the reason, if we project really far into the future, we're considering sort of like these big concepts, or these universals, or whatever you might want to call them. And we're really thinking like big, like, oh, you're right, who cares, millions of years and all these different realms. And, that's the mind. And there's nothing actually all that real about it, And he said it was like flying in an airplane. You can go really, really fast, and it makes it look like, if you look down, it makes you feel like you really could like cover that ground, so to speak, very quickly, right? And as if you know it. but it's quite different than walking the path and like being there. And, like that's the ground, that's earth uniting heaven and earth is actually coming back down and being more grounded. And what I think was so great about it was I got to experience it, just right away, which was this just noticing, like in conversations with other people, for example, hanging out with my daughter and noticing like, oh, my mind's starting to stray sort of towards the clouds. Right. So it was very sort of then just like come back and be very present with what was right in front of me. Right. And I know these are our regular practices. Right. But it sometimes helps, right, to just hear it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so it was really, really grounding. I found that it's super helpful. That was one aspect of it. Probably maybe some of the other stuff will come out in our conversation though, especially related to like, doubts and certainties and things like that. Yeah,
Cool.
because
I'm looking
I,
forward to it.
yeah, it was good. I like how it sort of tied into what we're talking about. They're not really, and they're totally related, but like we're not talking about this because I had that experience. It's just one of those things where it's all jiving together.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But meditation wise, my practice is quite interesting because the last couple of times that we spoke, we were talking about anxiety, and I was dealing with that. During that time, it was this anxious period. And what's interesting is noticing how there's like I can see that anxious mind. It's almost like the surface level, right? And yet because of my practice, there's this like calmness as well. So there's this clarity, this calmness, where like even with anxious and somewhat neurotic thoughts, even, right, I can just see it. Like I can win it. I can be like, yeah, yep, that's what that's like. There it is, right? Just like you were saying, like it's this sort of like I'm not pushing it away. It's not changing it or anything. It's just sort of aware of it. Like, yeah, that is how that is right now. Right now you have some thoughts going on or some experiences happening, whatever that leads you to be, feeling anxious or whatever. And like, yeah, that's what's happening. And then sort of as a result of that, it kind of takes the wind out of all of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. Yeah. And it sounds like too, your meditation practice has allowed you to recognize this kind of deep centeredness too amidst all of the chaos. And I love that imagery of just imagining a tree in a windstorm. At the top, of course, it's going to look wild and crazy and being thrashed about, but as you go down, there's this real rootedness. And I think that is kind of what we're moving towards, because
Mm.
we're not necessarily, we're not removing thoughts. Like thoughts are still going to happen because that's what the mind does. But we become more aware of our rootedness, and that becomes like kind of uh where our focus is. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. No, totally. Well, I think that's exactly it. Like deepening of that. I've always thought of myself as a bit of a tumbleweed, and blown about here and there by the mind's winds. But I am recognizing actually that there is maybe my tumbleweed's just stuck in a corner or something. I don't know, but there is a certain sort of like calmness, peaceful, even with some like really sort of speedy, anxious, stressful sort of thoughts or even experiences or whatever. There is this calmness there. There's this sort of and a clarity as well, where I see it. I'm like, yeah, that's what's going on
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we become, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I credit entirely my practice and the fact that I think more than just the practice, I think that what I credit it to is practicing when I don't necessarily feel like it, you
Oh yeah.
know? Like, I think that that's actually where, like, because the reason I don't want to sit, if I don't want to sit, the reason I don't want to sit is because things are speedy and there's something demanding it, grabbing my attention or whatever. And being able to say, like, yeah, that's happening, but I'm still going to sit down. I'm still going to practice. I'm still going to meditate. I think that that part of it is what allows me then to see it in ordinary, regular, non meditation or non practice, right?
Yeah. For sure. No, I think that's a huge part of what we're going to be talking about tonight, is
I
that
think so too. Yeah.
resilience in the face of, all the everyday chaos and disruption that happens in our lives and in our minds. And yeah, to also, I think what meditation is doing for me right now, um, which I wasn't aware of when I first started meditating, because I was kind of in this honeymoon phase of like, oh man, I feel like so calm when I meditate. Oh my gosh, like I've never experienced this kind of calm. It's amazing. And then with time, meditation, I think I was turning up the light and realizing how much clutter is in my mind. And so, it's there's a lot of chaos, and yet I think what meditation is showing me is that that chaos is of a similar nature, right, to the calm too. If I could just see that
That's a good point.
right, that it's just passing, and that I don't have to hope for the calm, or I don't have to resist the chaos, right? That there's just like a middle where I can just be there. That is really profound for me, because so much of my life has been about, I just want to apply antidotes to anxiety. I just want to get rid of the anxiety, right? But really, this is just, it's not of this nature that I imagine it, which is like fearful and to be rid of. It's just something that I need to experience and work with. So being kind to my anxious mind is like so much of my meditation practice right now. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. I mean, ultimately, that's why we're doing it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be kind towards ourselves, because otherwise we're sort of missing the point, right? It's not going to yield any of the results that we're hoping for.
Right. Right. Well, I'm wondering if we should check out some Lojong.
Absolutely, we should. Let me share my screen.
Great. And this could be a part of building a resilient meditation practice, is having a daily Lojong slogan to kind of guide your day, which I haven't been doing in a while, but I really enjoyed that when I was.
Yeah.
So I recommend, but let's see, what's our random.
Well, I was gonna say I lucked out. You really turned me on to this, so thank you so much, Jack, for the encouragement. I actually have it, like bookmarked, this particular page bookmarked in my like bookmark toolbar, so it's right there on the screen. And I usually try to hit it first thing in the morning, when I first turn on the computer. But then sometimes like I forget or whatever, but then I'll notice it sitting there and I'll be like, oh. And it really does, like when I see it and I don't just like read over it, but actually like sit with it, maybe 30 seconds to a minute, nothing much.
Yeah.
I notice a qualitative change in my experience and my perspective. So totally using the Lojong slogan generator is helpful.
Absolutely.
So here we go. I'm not even going to shake the page.
Okay. Ooh, number 37. Don't turn gods into demons. So Choyam Trungpa says this slogan refers to our general tendency to dwell on pain and go through life with constant complaints. We should not make painful that which is inherently joyful.
Let me ask you something. Do you think so something that we might make painful, there's like a lot of examples of that. Let's just say a person that causes you a lot of grief. Let's just say something like that. How is that person, for example, or how is your experience or relationship with such a person inherently joyful?
That's a great question. Well, it certainly doesn't, feel that way. But I know another Lojong slogan is to turn everything into the path. And so I imagine, in that way, you know, that we can look at our enemies as magnificent teachers, because they help break down our, you know, our ego and our self-centeredness. Uh, so I would imagine that. How about you? What do you think?
I couldn't think of a more brilliant response, Jack. That was beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I think so too. I think that's exactly it. Is like, well, you know, these giant, what appears to be giant pains in the butt or whatever, whether it's people or situations or whatever, they are, you know, tools of liberation, so to speak, if we want to use them that way. And ultimately, the path that we're on, you know, traveling the path should be joyful, and I think the end result, you know, is happiness, or at least freedom from suffering.
Yeah.
And so, and that is inherently joyful. So yeah, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too is that this interpretation by Choyam Trungpa is different from what I feel I've read about this slogan before, where I think I've read an interpretation that, you know, the gods in this slogan are like the teachings, they're the Dharma, you know, all the wonderful qualities that we could develop as we become a Buddha, and to not turn those into self-serving things, right? To not use them to make our, you know, to make ourselves famous or to get, you know, good reputation and pleasure and all of that. Because you can use the Dharma, as we've talked about, you know, for that spiritual materialistic purpose. And so I have seen an interpretation of this slogan that was more in that kind of flavor.
Oh, I like it. I like
Yeah,
it. That adds a totally different twist to it.
right, right. Oh, I love it. I think, well, that's what's so fun too about Lojong, is that they're so like short and just like little, you know, pith instructions, that there can be kind of multiple interpretations. And who is this beautiful statue?
So there's an image on the screen below the Lojong slogan of the goddess Uma. Doesn't say anything about who the goddess Uma is. I've never heard of the goddess
Hmm,
Uma, but
cool.
I like it. It's a nice statue. I like the way she's seated too. There's
I
something
like
to
that
it.
too. You know,
Yeah.
I've been kind of sitting like that in my meditation, where I'll have one leg kind of out to the side and one knee up. It just
Yeah.
feels comfortable. And I do, what happens is I'll put my arms out where I've got, you know, one on my knee and one up, you know, on the top of my other knee. And I just feel like this kind of like regal, like I'm almost like riding a horse or something, you know, and it's just really like, I feel like I can embody a little bit more like the qualities of a Buddha that's just like radiant and strong. And
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of fun. Like I do think that postures, different
Oh,
postures and,
yeah.
you know, mudras, like hand positions and stuff, those are just such lovely little transformations that we can make to our physical body, that can help us yeah, like embody those qualities, or at least feel like
Oh,
what it might symbolically, yeah, feel like.
symbolically or even physically, you know, like just in a very real sort of way, tiny little bitty adjustments to posture can
Yeah.
have these magnificent changes. I remember one time, it was one of the like earliest beginner meditation classes. I must have been going only for a few weeks, and I remember saying something to the effect of like, well, I just can't get, you know, I can't get my breath down past my chest and my belly, you know, like it won't go, it won't do it. And Dana, I think, was leading the class at that time, and she said, "Oh, try flipping your hands over."
Mm,
Like, so my hands had been down on, like on my knees, and she said, "Just flip your palms over and see if that makes any difference." And
yeah.
so I did it, and lo and behold, like I did it, and then my breath dropped down into my belly. It was wonderful.
That is so cool. I'm gonna try that. Isn't
Also,
it so amazing? It's so
yeah,
simple.
also the, you know, the uprightness, right? This the you know, like actually straight up rather than leaning back or leaning a little bit forward. Sometimes like I'll notice like, oh, I'm getting a little bit like maybe towards the slothful side of things or whatever. And it's because I'm maybe off by maybe like a half inch or something like that,
Totally.
leaning forward or back. And then just a mild, very mild correction, like one that wouldn't even be noticeable to somebody else, like looking at me. And I noticed all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, there, that's better.
Yeah, totally. One of them for me is I'll just check the position of my chin. And I'll
Yes.
just like kind of slightly tilt it down, because sometimes I notice like I end up kind of like like looking around almost. But if I just really check that, okay, no, I've got my chin down, that which means my eyes are, going to be more naturally looking down, and that really helps kind of just bring the energy down a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like you said, just so simple, and yet it really makes a difference. Um, I love that. I wonder if we have any kind of like experts in our Sangha on kind of body-based meditation, and that would be a really fun person to have on the show.
I'm sure they're there. Let's hunt them down.
We'll hunt them down. And if you're listening, let us know. We'd love to have you on. Well, speaking of meditation, tonight we are going to be discussing, just how to nurture and maintain a meditation practice, and ideally one that is resilient and that you feel excited to come back to, because that is a good thing. It does. Meditation doesn't have to be just this grueling challenge. It can also be very joyful and exciting to come back to. So
You said doesn't have to be. I would say is not, should not be,
well,
right?
sometimes it is for me.
We definitely have experiences with that sort of grueling aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like we do sometimes bring that sort of energy into it. But I think that in both of our cases, the experience has been that didn't quite yield the results that we were looking for.
Nope, it certainly doesn't. Coming to meditation with a plan to fix ourselves. I think that's one example of making it grueling.
Yes. It's painful. The results just, you're not going to see it like that. It's not going to happen like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that is a risk that a lot of people, especially in our culture, we have such a self-improvement culture and like a kind of prove yourself culture, that just naturally comes into how we arrive at the cushion. And so it's good to be aware that might be playing a role in your meditation.
Totally. We also have this sort of comparative culture. I think it was for me, one thing I didn't quite know why I was meditating. I just knew it was important to me to do it. I thought, basic sanity, something to that end. I wasn't looking to become a Buddhist or anything like that. But I did, as I meditated more and more, I did begin to sort of look around and sort of compare myself to other people and, see qualities that I liked or didn't like about them, that, mostly qualities that I did like about them. And a lot of times it was like calm, very present, very sort of like heart open, compassionate. I would notice these characteristics or these traits in people that I was meditating with. And then there would be this sort of like, yeah, I want that. I'm going to, they got it by meditating. So I'm going to meditate. I'm going to be like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna break down this lousy, crummy version of me.
That's right. I'm gonna, all those psychedelics didn't kill my ego, but now I'm finally gonna succeed through meditation.
Right. Oh, we can be so mean, can't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe that might be a good place to start, right? Is to nurture that meditation practice that you're actually going to want to come back to and be consistent with. There absolutely must be kindness towards oneself. that is essential.
It's a weird balance, though. It's a weird balance between, so kindness, yes, absolutely, but also not there has to be some stick-to-itiveness going on there.
Yeah.
How long, Jack, how long did it take you to develop a consistent, regular meditation practice, like where you were doing it every day?
Well, I think that is one way that my tendency towards like gruelingness and like rigidity has helped me, is that it was pretty quick into
Yeah.
starting.
Okay.
Is that I was just like, nope, this is just something I do. I meditate every day. But I would say, for the first maybe year, I wasn't consistent on time. I would, maybe try and squeeze in, like if I had time, like 6 minutes, and that would be my meditation for the day, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
Start with 6, start with 3, whatever it is, just start. But that's something that I have some, I think, karmic skill in, is that I can decide on something and then do it, and consistently do it. So, if that's not something that you're strong in, don't compare yourself to that. Right. But I think one thing that has really helped with the resilience in that way is that I don't skip a day. And I know that if I were to skip a day, I would start to recognize slips in my wellness, my connections with people, my relationships. Because I know when I have cut back on my meditation and maybe just been like, oh crap, I forgot, like, okay, I'm just going to do a few minutes. Then I do notice this kind of effect. And at the same time, I think the other side of that coin is the kindness, right? So rather than just showing up because I think that I should, right? I have this idea in my mind that this is what I do. I should meditate. And in fact, I should meditate more. I really need to work on softening that. And so that's why I emphasize the kindness, because I'm already on the side of the spectrum that is very hard on myself. And so then I need to kind of swing back the other way to find my middle. So emphasizing the kindness. And I see you smiling, because I think I know what you're going to say, is that maybe we have different different approaches to this.
You and I are polar opposites
I
in this
know.
respect, Jack. I love it.
I know,
I
it's
love
good.
it.
It's
It's so good. I am on the soft end of the spectrum. I'm much more likely to sort of be like I don't do well with shoulds, like
That's so good.
other people shitting on me shitting on me, like it's not that it doesn't happen, or that I don't hear myself shooting myself, but I don't respond well to it. It doesn't compel me to act. And I have a tendency to be very lenient, very forgiving. I wouldn't say kind. It's not. I think the motivation, or what's underneath it, might be quite similar. The response is just different. Because I don't think it's necessarily kindness. It's certainly not compassionate either in many cases. It's more sort of like a laziness, sort of sloth, sort of conservation of energy approach, or whatever you want to call it. But what I found, that what the advice that you gave, or is what really helped me, though, is develop, like what I heard again and again and again. It took me years, so it didn't take you took you some time, but not very long, to develop a regular meditation practice. Mine was regular in the sense that I went once a week to beginner's meditation. So there was that. I was very regular about that, because I enjoyed it. It was lovely to do. It made me happy. But doing it at home did not, I didn't like that. There were times where it felt like I was like I was sitting on a hot seat or something, and I just couldn't. I literally I remember vividly sitting down on my cushion and leaping up from it and being like, oh hell no, I'm not doing
Wow.
that, you know. And so it was the encouragement actually, you know, from the beginners meditation group. What I heard again and again and again was consistent, regular practice. Nothing about you have to sit for an hour, nothing, nothing like that, but just regularity. It was Sue Forrester in particular who was like, you know, even if you just 6 minutes, six
Yeah.
minutes, just that's it, you know. And that was really heartening. But then I noticed that there were times where I was like, no, I'm not even going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where Matthew's advice really became most important to me, where he said, well, if you're not going to meditate, at least go and either sit down on your cushion or put your hand on the cushion and say, consciously, intentionally choosing to not meditate today,
Yeah.
right? And at least you still do that. And what it reminds me of is advice that I've heard from exercise, you know, coaches or you know, therapists or whatever you want to call it, where they suggest like, well, it's okay if you, even if you don't want, let's say going to the gym is what you're trying to do, you don't feel like it, you're absolutely not going to do it today. Go to the gym, walk in the door, look around, and say, I'm not going to do this today, and then go back and drive home. It's okay. But
Love that.
it is training. See,
Yeah.
that's the thing is you're not giving yourself an out. And that's where being that for somebody on my end of the spectrum, that's where the real compassion and kindness comes from, is to not let that sort of like, I'm not going to do it, not give in to that, because there's nothing kind about it.
Yeah.
It's in, you know, and so going and at least putting a little bit of effort into the training aspect of it was incredibly helpful to me. And it was with that kind of like, no, don't expect too much. It's okay. Just the basics, the very, very basics will get you there.
Right. Gosh, there's so much there that I find so interesting. For one, I love that idea of just showing up
That's
and
it.
recognizing that rather than saying, I should do this, we say, you know what, I could do this, and I'm choosing not to.
Yeah.
It's empowering, right?
That's right. That's
And
right.
oftentimes what happens, right, when we do something like that is that it's like, okay, maybe I'll just do a
Ah.
little bit, because you put in that effort to
Right.
just show up. And then it's like, okay, well, let me plop my butt down for a few minutes, and
There's some of the best sits I've ever had.
yeah, it's fascinating. And another thing that really stood out to me was just how, in our different versions of the end of the spectrum, like for you, where maybe it verges on kind of laziness and maybe a little bit wanting to indulge in whatever else you're doing, that on the surface, that might seem like kindness, but it's not true
No,
kindness.
no.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, what I experience where I'm really hard on myself, I show up, I do it, um, seems on appearance like true discipline or like discipline, but it's not true discipline. Because in fact, what happens is that where is my mind that whole time when I'm in that state of like hard on myself?
Right.
It's everywhere else on all the other things that I have to do, right? Everything else on my checklist. And so that's not true discipline.
No.
So it's so fascinating how we always have to find our middle in
It reminds me of those, you know, those discussions around like different parenting styles, and how there's like, on the one hand, a lot of times like there's the authoritarian parent,
Mhm.
and the child in us is always like, ooh, yeah, that's not a good style,
Yeah,
right? Like the authoritarian, nobody likes the authoritarian.
right.
But you know, the laissez-faire parenting
It's
or
not
form
good
of
either.
self-governance is just as bad. It yields I mean, sure, what comes out of it, it looks different, but it's just as crappy,
Yeah,
right? There has to, it's sort of like, you know, it reminds me, I don't know where I've heard this, but it's sort of like our bodies, right? Like in the sense, like, you know, we need the rigidity of our bones, right? But we also need the soft, pliable fat and tissues and muscles, right? Like we need both. If we were just the tissues, we would just be a blob. That's me, right? If we were just the skeleton, right, just the bones, you know, like that, then we wouldn't, you know, like we wouldn't be capable of moving around or doing anything else. What we need is both, and a nice balance of both.
Right.
Right.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. I love Dharma, because it's not just a one-stop shop. Like it's not like one size fits all. Like you have to, in your meditation practice, explore, which means that you're not just gonna just show up and sit, and that's what it's gonna be like forever. You're gonna be like experiencing all these different fluctuations, and with time, kind of notice like maybe a general pattern, but it's constantly changing and fluctuating, which is, I think, one thing that brings me back to it too, is that it's
Yeah.
like, wow, this is this exploration into my mind and the experience of being a sentient being. This is fascinating.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it. How, you know, Dharma practice and the Dharma, like reading, for example, Dharma books or listening to Dharma talks. How it's not a handing over of like a belief system,
Mm,
right? Here is information, and you are going to believe this, and then it's all going to work out. Not at all. It's like tools for learning how to experience our lives and ourselves, and like what's actually happening right now, and what's actually happening for each one of us is quite different. You know, we have all these these different energies going on, right, that influence our experience in any given moment. And so like learning like how to investigate it, learning how to befriend ourselves, learning how to tame, right? Like that's what all these, you know, the Dharma practice is all about, right? And what it looks like is different. It's just as individualistic, or just as unique rather, as, you know, each one of us.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's really beautiful. And I again, coming back to Sangha, I think that is another way that Sangha can influence us in our meditation practice and help keep us going, is that we get to see how other people are transforming,
Mm.
in their own unique way of transforming, while also tapping into this kind of universal nature that we're all like starting to uncover through our meditation and our study and whatnot. And so it's just really exciting. And so I think that has been, gosh, maybe like, if not the most important thing for my returning to meditation practice, certainly one of the most important things. And I started out like you did, going to the beginner meditation group, and really feeling what it was like to be with people who were just genuinely wanting to learn about themselves and others. And that was really what drew me in. And it certainly is what kept me at the temple, which has allowed me to have a very deep meditation practice,
Right.
is that I'm invested in all of our lives and our practice and what we're doing. Even though I'm far away, I feel just as much a part of the community. And that absolutely helps me keep training.
Mm.
Hands, yeah.
So what do you do when you know, when you start, because there's times where it's not just like that you don't feel like meditating or whatever, but sometimes like, I don't know, at least for me, there's sort of a pull towards more of, like I was saying about the sort of nihilism, like there's this sort
Yeah.
of like, ah, what's
What's
the
it
point?
for?
I mean, even in a bigger, like, yeah, okay, so I get a little more clarity, I get a little more peaceful, and yeah, I become more helpful to other people, yada, yeah, yeah, yeah. So what, right? Like, you know, and not only that, but like, there's also this sort of this notion of like, whoa, okay, but there's, in addition to just, you know, meditation practice, there's all this sort of dharma to learn, all this knowledge to take in, and you know, and I don't understand, I don't understand any of it, right? And it's so daunting to me, and I'm like, is it, you know, am I kidding myself? Like there's that, sometimes I veer into that sort of territory. Do you
Like
ever
that,
experience anything like that? Yeah, yeah,
doubt.
exactly.
Oh yeah, certainly. I would say mine kind of shows up when I'm feeling depressed about like the state of the world. And I kind of, I start to feel very like time bound and just kind of like, God, this world is so shitty and just like messed up. And we're never going to get out of this. And, what is it for to just be nice? Like, I don't want to just be nice. Like, we gotta do something, um and so certainly I can have doubts then. I think what really helps me in those moments is I just take a look back, like just maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I look at my life before I started meditating, and I can really see how very much of a different person I was. And reminding myself of that is really inspiring. And even though just like I'll feel like this kind of like, gosh, I don't understand any of this. And I feel like in some ways my meditation is getting like worse, quote unquote. Like it's more just, it feels like it's more distracted. And yet my trajectory looks very different. Like there's uh and so kind of I have to look realistically at what's happened and what is happening. And
Hmm.
just kind of take myself back a little bit, um I think that's really that is what I do.
Yeah.
I do these kind of reminders. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I do the same. That was sort of like what I would brought to Lama's attention on Saturday was I was like, yeah, okay, look, I'm not lying. I totally see my life, I know it's not a self-improvement project, but goddamn, my life is infinitely better,
Yeah.
right? Like much better. When I look at it and I'm objective about it, I can tell. Other people say so. I say so. There's no doubt in my mind that my practices, that Dharma practice has really led to a reduction of suffering in my life, and it has improved the quality of my life, my relationships with other beings, other people, all of that. But there's still sometimes this like, but so what?
Yeah,
Okay, but
yeah,
right. And that's where, so then we started talking about like bodhicitta. And I was like, yeah, but even so, nurturing, the seeds of bodhicitta and allowing it to grow, still, so what? Right. Like, I don't, like, there's this part of me that's still kind of bothered, about all of this whole existence mess. I don't like it. Right. I don't like the idea of non-existence either, but I
yeah,
really just not digging. I don't even care. Like other realms and gods, I don't care. Right.
yeah,
Like why? Like I just don't like any of it.
yeah.
And he said, well, you know, if you're in pain, you don't question the relief of pain.
Mhm.
You don't, there's no, it is its own, it is self-explanatory, right? So the relief of suffering is self-explanatory. So obviously there's still some suffering going on there, right? So because it's a I think an incredibly valid point is that there's this like, if you are in pain, then you don't question, like, making the pain go away. Nobody says, well, why would you want to make the pain go away? why
Yeah,
would you why would you do that, right?
yeah,
And in that sense, it was kind of, I chuckled. I thought it was a good one because I was like, yeah, that's true. Actually, I
yeah,
see it, right? And I see that the doubting mind, there's a reason why doubt is, one of the five mental hindrances, and one of the reasons why, sort of the skeptical doubt is, the main thing actually that will throw us off the path.
yeah,
The rest of the hindrances, as long as we keep showing up, will it'll take care of itself, right? Whereas doubt is that one will actually make us stop,
yeah. Wow.
right?
There's a lot in there. And I think, you're touching on something really important about becoming certain that we need to we in our practice we have to kind of investigate until we come to not like full on certainty, you know, maybe that's enlightenment, but like having a sense of certainty about the reality of where we're at and what we're experiencing. Because when we really investigate, and I can't say that I have, you know, like a super clear realization about this, but I've had some little, you know, kind of glimmers of insight around the depth of the suffering in this life, but, you know, in countless lives. And so, you know, I think that is a really big piece to this, is that we have to become somewhat certain about this is, I don't want to keep this going. You know, I want to do something about this. I need to keep working on transforming my mind, because this is not acceptable. I don't want to be in this pain. Like, you know, you and Lama were talking about, is self-explanatory that once we recognize pain, we're going to want to remove ourselves from it. And so there's some element of not recognizing that we're in this much pain and suffering. So we're just kind of like, okay, we're going to float about in this. It sucks. Existence sucks. But like, you know, what are you going to do about it? You know? And so you have to become certain that actually, no, this really sucks. And we need to do something about it. And that's where the meditation comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, so gaining some certainty, you know, that was actually another thing that came up in the conversation with Lama. I'm glad you brought it up, is that, you know, he was like, yeah, so you're right, there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, that's what doubt is all about, right? Like, and you're sort of uncertain, like, whatever, let's just say doubt about some beliefs or some idea or some concept, like, I don't know if I really believe in reincarnation. There's that, you know, like that kind of like doubt or skepticism or whatever you want to call it. And his point, he said, you know, like, we're not trying to get rid of certainty. There are some things that are certain, but there's also a whole lot of stuff that is uncertain, and you're never gonna know, right? Like, that's just a mental trap that you're gonna get yourself into.
That's
And
where OCD is all about certainty. So that's an extreme version of it. Yeah.
Exactly. You want to eliminate all uncertainty, but that's impossible, right? Like, you simply cannot. But what he brought up, what I thought was really nice, he said, you know, there are some certainties though, right? And that's what Buddhism is all about, is discovering those things that are certain. So, for example, you know, the various truths that we might talk about, but, you know, just as a great example of it is interdependence. And when we examine any of these truths, then, and we really sit with it, and we need to do it on our own. It can't come from outside, right? It has to be experiential, as we said, you know, as we were talking about, like, it has to be something that we ourselves are like, yeah, like, I'm dead certain that that is the way it is. And what's interesting is that when we sit with all of these truths, there's not even all that many. They're quite simple. There's not that many of them, right? There's not that much that we can be all that certain about. But when we examine them and we sit with them, we can see the implications. And we can see like what that kind of means, like, oh, that's what the rest of this Dharma practice, that's what the rest of Dharma is about, is sort of like, well, what's the natural conclusion that follows from the basics? And that involves, like, you know, everything, even down to living ethically, right? You know, how do we behave? How do we be in this world? It's, you know, like the existentialist, I don't know who it was that said it, but it was like, you know, all this question about, you know, why life, like, why, you know, why this, why is it like that, is the wrong question. You know, you're actually kind of more along the lines of asking of how to live, you know.
Yeah, I feel like I get stuck in the why, you know, and it sounds like that's what you've been dealing with too, you know, and rather like, okay, that can just be endless, right? That we could just spend a universe of lifetimes on why, but you know, we're not going to remove that arrow of suffering, right?
No, you're just, all you're doing is just stabbing yourself with the damn arrow again and again. And you know, that's the recommendation that I've heard, and it seems to work with sort of skeptical doubt, is to bring it to the cushion. Don't, you know, don't turn the god of doubt into the demon of doubt, right? So, okay, so you have whatever the doubt is about. is it even possible to reduce suffering? Something like that. Does meditation actually do anything good? Whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter what it is that's going on, right? Like if you sit, you bring it to the cushion, and just like everything else, we can watch the doubt and we can see it and be like, oh, that's just doubt. Just like we might say, that's anxiety, or that's whatever, lustfulness, or that's jealousy, or that's whatever. And just look at it and be with it and experience it. And then just like everything else, we see one of these truths, one of these things that we can be so certain about is it's impermanent. The
Yeah.
doubt itself, actually, if you shine the light of awareness directly onto the doubt itself, you'll see something true, right? You gain some certainty about impermanence.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that in itself, is that kind of momentary relief from the suffering, where it's like we get that kind of glimmer of like, okay, this is possible. And I feel like that is a huge part of coming to a resilient meditation practice is, getting to that place of like, okay, I'm onto something. I'm learning something. I'm gaining some certainty in my mind, and maybe even finding some skill in navigating these kind of really powerful and intense emotions or fears, doubts, all of those things. When, like you say, we bring them to the cushion, we're developing our skill to be able to interact with them in a way that isn't overwhelming, but that's actually useful.
Yeah.
That can be turned into the path. And so I feel like my my number one encouragement is to just show up, to just do it, to just sit for that 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 24, whatever you decide on, because you absolutely will start developing your skill. And that competency, so that you're not so overwhelmed. And then it becomes, not just training for the cushion, but training for real life, right? Lama loves to say, that Dharma is training for real life. And so we're bringing everything that we learn on the cushion out into the world. And there, all this kind of fruition, all of this, wonderful engagement with ourselves and the world happen. So yeah, we're doing magic, but like very practical magic.
Yeah, no kidding. It really is magical, and I think having come from a Christian background, I think it's interesting how all of this, like it plays with my ideas about what faith is. So, I was taught that faith is the assured expectation of things hoped for. Like you believe in something that you hope will be true, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually not what the kind of faith that we're talking about is at all, but rather it's this sort of like faith, confidence based upon our own direct experience, right? We can have faith, for example, that water is wet because we have experienced the wetness of water, right? And it's the same thing here with the experiences of sitting with our mind, right? We can know what's actually going on. We can have some confidence in what, like in, for example, the fact that it can be changed, right? That it doesn't have to always be the way that it is, right? That you can change and create, what do they say, turn the mind into an ally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's some faith and there's some confidence, like that's really
Yeah.
possible. How do you do it? By doing it, by showing up, as you said. Just keep showing up, it'll happen.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
then you'll believe in
absolutely.
it, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to believe in it first, just do it.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, I'm excited. I feel like this really it was rejuvenating for me. I feel just uh sparkly, if that's a
Aw,
good word.
you still have your headache?
Yes, but I'm I'm gonna just tell the truth. Yes, I still have a headache, but I feel sparkly and like just lighter. And
Isn't that amazing? You can be
it is.
sparkly and lighthearted and laughing with a headache. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yes. Well, in gratitude to you for helping bring that about. Always so appreciative, Daniel.
The feeling is most assuredly mutual, Jack.
Awesome. And for our lovely audience, we appreciate you too, and are very much looking forward to next time. So take care, everybody.
Adios, amigos.
All right, bye.